How's it going, Canisius community? It's Andy Deyell back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular Zoom series where we check in and connect with alums all over the United States and all over the world and check on what they've been up to since their time at Canisius High School. I am joined today by Colin Huntley from the class of 1996. Colin, how are you today?
I'm great, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. It's great to see you. Colin joins us today from Washington, D.C., or the Washington, D.C. area, Bethesda, Maryland, to be exact, where he is an attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice. Colin, tell us a little bit about what you do there as Deputy Director.
So I've been with the Justice Department for about 14 years, and I'm currently Deputy Director of the Civil Fraud Section, and I oversee about 130 attorneys that handle cases all over the United States, in every state, every territory from Guam to Alaska. And the matters that we handle are all related to alleged fraud in connection with government programs, government agencies. Most of that is healthcare fraud. Some of it is anything from customs fraud to fraud in connection with disaster assistance following hurricanes, floods. And it's great fun.
Great. And then we're going to circle back to that, or you're going to get us to like your sort of current position in a minute, but let's travel back in time a little bit. Graduate of the class of 1996, not too long ago. Tell us a little bit about sort of growing up in Buffalo and your time, how you found out about Canisius, got to Canisius, and your time at 1180 Delaware.
Sure. So I am originally from outside Buffalo in Amherst, New York. And I went to a small Catholic school called Christ the King, which is an excellent school, still is. And there were not that many kids from Christ the King who went to Canisius. I think there were more kids who went to St. Joe's. I had an older brother who went to St. Joe's, which maybe made the decision for Canisius a little easier because I was one of those kids who didn't want to go where my older brother went. But other than that, I didn't have any family connection. I went to an open house and it made a big impression on me. I went for a shadow day and I was hooked. Just kind of seeing how different the school was from this little small neighborhood school I'd gone to, where every kid I knew in my class lived within 1 or 2 miles of each other. And then going to a place like Canisius, where kids are from a big, expansive region, just made a big impact. And, I had heard quite a bit about the academics of Jesuit schools, and that was a big appeal to me. And when I started, I immediately made friends from all over, from in the city, outside the city, north towns, south towns, and it was just a great experience academically and socially.
And so what were some of the things that you were interested in during your 4 years, things you participate in, maybe influences, the different teachers and administrators who sort of shepherd you along the way?
So all 4 years at Canisius, I participated on the crew team. That was great fun. And it took me all over. So we got to compete in regattas all over the country. I had not done a ton of travel as a kid prior to coming to Canisius. So it really opened a lot of doors for me in that sense. And then it also opened doors after Canisius in terms of college. I participated in the sport throughout college and then got to travel internationally as well and all over the U.S., when I was at Georgetown. So that was a real big part of my experience at Canisius. But then also, academically, I had just phenomenal teachers. And there were teachers there that prepared me in a way for college that I just think is really, really important in terms of the academic rigor, the need for preparation, the discipline. And I think back to some of the teachers I had, like Frank Tudini, Mike Lavigny. I mean, those guys were harder teachers and more demanding teachers than most of the teachers that I had in college or law school after that.
That's great. And so after your 4 years at Canisius, tell us a little bit about sort of your post-Canisius career, where you went for undergrad, and then talk a little bit about sort of your path in the legal field.
Sure. So Canisius was really the first 4 years of 11 consecutive years of Jesuit schooling for me. So I went from Canisius to Georgetown. and did 4 years at Georgetown, and then went to law school at Georgetown. And while I was in law school at Georgetown, I also lived at a Jesuit high school just outside of DC, Georgetown Prep High School. And that was, a terrific Jesuit education experience of a different sort, very different than Canisius High School. And also it was a nice thing to do in terms of balancing the demands of law school as well as, paying for it and saving a lot of money. So I had an interesting path through Georgetown Law, a little bit of a detour to Georgetown Prep. Then following law school, I moved to the Boston area, and I was in the Boston area for a handful of years. I had worked for a couple of federal judges at the trial court level, the appeals court level, then went to a large international law firm where I was one of about 1,400 lawyers in about 30 countries. And it was a real big place. And the people were great. The work was really interesting. Most of what I did was defensive work, where I represented companies that were under investigation by the government or embroiled in lawsuits where the government had sued them. And the work was great fun, but not necessarily as rewarding as I thought it would be if I were actually on the other side of those types of cases. And so, I was at a bit of an inflection point after a handful of years in private practice, and I decided to try out the Justice Department. And I thought at the time it would be a 2 to 3 year stint, and it's now year 14 of a 2-year stint. And it's just been great. And when I started, I thought I would do it for as long as it was fun and rewarding, and it's just never stopped being fun and rewarding.
That's great. And how did your time at Canisius prepare you for your current role and then sort of the roles that you had leading up to, deputy director?
That's a really great question. I think, most people probably immediately gravitate toward the academic preparation. You can get that at a lot of schools.
Sure.
Canisius has a terrific academic reputation, which is much deserved, but really it's those things beyond academics that I think really stand out in my mind. Sometimes people call them soft skills, your sort of emotional intelligence, your ability to really understand and appreciate others' lived experiences. That was huge for me. I came from a very small neighborhood. I had met very few kids outside of my neighborhood. And then all of a sudden I had all of these friends from different places with different experiences. And, that made a big impact on me. And that prepared me, from a standpoint of going to a large university where I had met lots of kids from different backgrounds as well. And I think some of that really soft skill leadership preparation is something that you cannot get at other schools. And I got a lot of at Canisius, and I got it, on the athletics when I was on the crew team. I got it in the classroom. I got it through other activities. And it was one of those things that just gets drilled into you from day one when they talk about, being a man or woman for others.
Which that's a great segue because you touched on it right there, and I'll just take us a little bit deeper. Canisius' education is more than academic. It's more than even the soft skills. There's sort of an Ignatian component to that, this ethos of being a man or woman for or with others, and this idea that a life of significance is lived can be achieved through a life of service. It's service to others. And so how do you find that sort of Ignatian message present in your life today?
So that's a great question. And, one of the things that I think of when anyone asks me about Ignatian principles is the concepts of collaboration and teamwork. You really experience that, for example, if you go on a retreat at Canisius, which is something, everybody should make sure they make time for during their time at CHS. But you sort of see how that works firsthand in the retreat experience. And then it's a principle that is easily adapted outside of the classroom on playing fields, or in my case, down on the river at the West Side Rowing Club. And those were big parts of the sort of Ignatian formation for me. Also, you mentioned too, this emphasis on sort of a shared mission and a sense of service. Those are really significant. I know for me, when I was working at a large firm, it was it was fun, and it certainly paid really well. And when I got to this crossroads and thought, well, is this something that I should keep doing? Should I try something else? I found I was just really drawn to service-oriented work, and this idea that something that was a little bit more mission-driven would be, more fulfilling for me. And so I tried that out, and I really liked it. And there's obviously sacrifices that one makes if you're leaving a lucrative private sector career for something in government service, but it's worth the trade-off. And I think my time at Canisius sort of shaped me in a way that made me far more comfortable thinking about those transitions and making sure that I was actually pursuing something that I was going to find, really meaningful.
That's great. As somebody that's not too far removed from their formal schooling and, it's fairly early in their career, how could you give some advice to young alums, kids that are just either leaving here, maybe they're about to go to college, maybe they're just leaving college and starting their career. What advice would you impart to some young people today?
Well, I mentioned the retreats. That's something that makes Canisius really unique. And it's something that will be available to you at a lot of colleges and universities as well. And so people should really take full advantage of that and do those retreat experiences. The connections that you're going to make with your classmates are really lasting. I can remember a retreat that I did in my final year at Canisius and making some friendships with kids who I obviously knew, had shared some classes with, but was never really friends with. And then really forged some good, strong, long-lasting and enduring friendships with those folks. So that's one thing for sure. Another thing that I would also recommend is an emphasis on trying new things, especially things outside of your comfort zone. You're going to have lots of opportunities, especially once you get to college, to do some improv work with a troupe at school, or a little bit of acting, and you have lots of opportunities to do those things now at Canisius, and there's just a ton of offerings from extracurriculars to sports. And I think sometimes people are a little bit too self-conscious in terms of whether or not they want to try something new, or afraid that maybe they're not going to be very good at it. And I can't emphasize enough that by the time you get to be like 40, none of that matters at all. Nobody remembers any of that stuff. Yeah. And it's just good to get outside your comfort zone and try, really try new things. And then a third thing I'd say is to really sort of embrace and leverage your Canisius connections, your Buffalo connections. As someone who is a proud Buffalonian but does not live in Buffalo, I can tell you from firsthand experience that just in my day-to-day professional life, I meet people from Buffalo, and Buffalo people somehow manage to find each other, and they look out for each other, and they kind of understand, that the sort of special aspect of growing up in a town like Buffalo. And also, for me, when I was getting ready to leave to go to college, I had this amazing pre-made network that the Jesuits at Canisius sort of set up for me. So when I got to Georgetown, I had already been told by my teachers at Canisius, like Father Garavena, David McCallum, Father Ciancimino, they had sort of given me the connection to professors I had not yet met, who I would have years later at Georgetown. So when I arrived on day one at Georgetown, I could seek out these other Jesuits who they were friendly with, and sort of immediately have someone who was looking out for me, who could give me advice. And then those folks became lifelong friends of mine as well.
It's great advice. Let's pivot a little bit and look at the future. What does the Huntley family have in store? What are you guys planning for the next few years? What about personally, professionally? What's going on in your world, and what are your sort of goals and aspirations as you look to the future?
So my wife and I have 3 kids, 9, 7, and 4. So we, most of our immediate near-term future is sort of mapped out by soccer schedules, school schedules, lots of disinfectant in the COVID era. We have been reluctant to do too much planning just given the current state of things with COVID restrictions. But work-wise, I intend to be doing exactly what I'm doing right now, again, until it's no longer fun and fulfilling, which, it remains. And Bethesda, Maryland, where we live, is a terrific place. We get back to Buffalo very frequently, at least 2 to 3 times a year. And, we will certainly continue doing that. And to the extent that there are Canisius folks who are headed to Washington, D.C. area schools, who are interested in finding out about internship opportunities, things like that, I definitely encourage you to, sort of leverage that network, and certainly let me know. I'm always happy to talk to folks about those types of experiences in D.C.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us today, Colin. It was really great catching up. Wish you the best of luck, and stay in touch, and keep us updated on how things are going down there in the DC area. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Andy.
All right. We'll talk soon.